Rarely in American politics has a new industry spent so much money with such apparent impact as the cryptocurrency business did in the last election. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are digital assets created and maintained by networks of computers. Mystifying to some and mesmerizing to others, they're used for transactions and as high-risk investments with potentially high rewards. At least 17 million Americans own crypto, and how the industry should be regulated in the U.S. has been the subject of much dispute. With an important piece of legislation now before Congress, perhaps it's no surprise that big crypto companies were among the top donors in this past election. And since the election, the price of Bitcoin has hit record highs. It isn't clear whether the crypto industry will get Congress or the incoming Trump administration to craft the regulation or the legitimacy that they seek. But they've been investing a whole lot of their own cash to get something.
Bernie Moreno!
In the final months of a hotly contested race for a Senate seat in Ohio, Republican Bernie Moreno received $40 million of positive ads from a political action committee known as a super PAC.
Defend American Jobs is responsible for the content of this ad.
The ads didn't mention cryptocurrency at all, but they were paid for by crypto companies, and they helped Moreno defeat Democrat Sherrod Brown.
This is a disappointment.
The chairman of the Senate Banking Committee and an outspoken critic of crypto.
In a close election, that kind of money makes a huge difference, particularly in the end of a cycle. Do you think you tipped the scales?
Do I think that putting that amount of money in the Ohio election had an impact? Absolutely.
Crypto for all of us is...
Brad Garlinghouse is the CEO of a company called Ripple, whose cryptocurrency XRP became the third largest in the world this past week. Ripple and two other companies contributed $144 million to super PACs that supported pro-crypto Republicans and Democrats.
Do I think we had an impact to elect a Democratic senator in Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin? Yes, absolutely. Do I think we had an impact in Arizona? A Democratic senator in Arizona, Gallego? Absolutely.
Overall, crypto companies contributed 1/3 of all direct corporate contributions to super PACs. Of the 29 Republicans and 33 Democrats the industry backed in congressional races, 85% won.
It's incredible.
So you see this election as a major victory?
For sure.
But some people will look at that and say, you teamed up and bought an election.
At the end of the day, voters voted. We educated voters, as many industries do, about candidates.
But you helped supercharge the candidates with the money in the coffers, right? On whatever is they wanted to talk about.
That's absolutely right.
So in your mind, is the message for any lawmaker looking to run for office that they have to take your industry seriously, fear your industry?
I think all citizens should want people in Congress, on the Senate and the House, who are going to look to how do we use technologies in a way to benefit citizens.
But the best news for the crypto industry came at the top of the ticket.
The United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
Before this cycle, in June of 2021, Donald Trump was saying, Bitcoin seems like a scam. Do you understand what happened with that transformation?
I didn't have a front row seat to that. I think it's clear that Donald Trump embraced crypto and crypto embraced Donald Trump.
Big news, the World Liberty Financial token sale is now live.
3 weeks before the election, Trump announced the launch of a new digital coin that he had a financial stake in.
Is that a conflict of interest in your point of view?
Whether or not it's a conflict of interest, the voters have knowingly said, we want this person to be our president.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the voters have spoken more so than I have.
Trump's cabinet picks have had very positive things to say about crypto. Here's what his choice for Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, told Fox Business News.
Crypto is about freedom, and the crypto economy is here to stay.
Perhaps most significantly, this past week, Trump selected a new head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Paul Atkins, a former SEC commissioner who's done some consulting for crypto companies, is expected to take a very different approach than Biden-era chair Gary Gensler, who filed more than 120 lawsuits against crypto companies. Last year, Gensler told the House Financial Services Committee,
I've never seen a field that's so non-compliant with laws written by Congress
Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse says the SEC's approach was the main reason his company and two others created the biggest industry super PAC called Fairshake.
People are like, why did these companies come together and organize and say, this matters? And it's a reaction to a war on crypto.
So if there had been a different SEC chair than Gary Gensler?
I'm not sure Fairshake would exist.
Really?
Absolutely.
In response, an SEC spokesperson said any amount spent by the crypto industry on legal defense or influence peddling pales in comparison to the savings lost by crypto investors to frauds and failures.
It was definitely a war on crypto.
John Reed Stark, former chief of internet enforcement at the SEC, says he owns no cryptocurrency and has never worked for the industry. Like Garlinghouse, he believes voters have given President-elect Trump a mandate to govern.
As far as these election results are concerned, the clear mandate is the SEC needs to lay off crypto, and that's exactly what's going to happen.
But that doesn't mean this former SEC official thinks the agency's actions were wrong.
Crypto is a scourge. It's not something that you want in your society. It has no utility. It's just pure speculation. Remember, there's no balance sheet to crypto. There's no financial statements.
You're talking about SEC filings. There's no public disclosure mandate.
Exactly. Nothing, but also there's no audit, inspection, examination, net capital requirements, no licensure of the individuals involved, and there's no transparency into it. That creates real systemic risk, not just risk for investors. But the other part that people don't really talk about enough are the dire externalities that are enabled by crypto.
What do you mean?
Every single crime you can conceive of is easier to do now because of crypto, especially ransomware, human sex trafficking, sanctions evasion, money laundering. North Korea is financing their nuclear weapons program using crypto.
Sam Bankman-Fried's conviction for fraud at one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world is a case study of what can happen without proper oversight. Based in the Bahamas, the FTX exchange collapsed in 2022, imperiling $8 billion of customer assets, much of it beyond the reach of U.S. regulators.
There were crimes there. There was fraud there.
I view that as not as dissimilar than if we say Bernie Madoff went to jail, that doesn't make every hedge fund manager a criminal.
Of course.
There's a lot of good actors in crypto.
Ripple's CEO says his company employs 900 people and has been working with regulated financial institutions to create a faster and cheaper way for people to send money overseas. XRP is the digital currency it uses to do that. But Ripple also sold the digital currency XRP to investors, and XRP now trades on exchanges where people can buy or sell it in the hope of making a profit.
So the SEC sued your company in December of 2020. That was the tail end of the Trump administration. Why?
Well, their allegation was that Ripple in our sales of XRP represented the sale of an unregistered security.
A security like a stock or another asset class.
Correct.
Garlinghouse says Ripple has spent over $150 million fighting the SEC in court, arguing that the digital currency XRP shouldn't be subject to the agency's registration and disclosure requirements, as if it were a stock offering.
I went to Harvard Business School. I think I'm reasonably intelligent about something like what is a security. So never once had I considered the possibility that, okay, maybe XRP is a security.
I've read every case, I've read every motion, and judges have said over and over again that these are securities. And they haven't said it like this is a close call. They said this is an obvious call.
Brad Garlinghouse disputes that. He also argues that existing securities laws don't fit well with the new technology, and Congress needs to draft new rules for these new digital assets.
We haven't been asking to be deregulated. We've been asking to be regulated. So we have been saying, hey, look, just give us clear rules of the road.
So what was your strategy with putting money to work in the election? Was it to then go write those rules of the road that you want written?
No, our goal has been to simply get rules written. I mean, the good news is there was
not just any rules.
Well, there was a bill passed this summer in the House, bipartisan support, called FIT 21. Mm-hmm. It was a Republican bill. 71 Democrats supported it.
The bill is passed.
FIT 21 tries to create a new regulatory framework for digital assets. While the SEC will still play a role, the legislation gives more responsibility for regulating cryptocurrencies to the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which oversees futures markets for everything from gold to pork bellies and already has some jurisdiction over Bitcoin.
The SEC is about maybe 10 times the size of the CFTC. The SEC's mandate is one of investor protection. They have legions of attorneys who go out and do these inspections, examinations, and audits. The CFTC is more about the integrity of the marketplace. I don't blame the crypto industry for wanting to be under the CFTC. It's a much easier regulatory regime.
It has bipartisan support, and it passed the House.
It doesn't surprise me at all that it has the support it has because, again, it doesn't pay for a member of Congress or the Senate, whoever you're talking about, it doesn't pay for them to be anti-crypto. There's no one that's going to give them contributions because of that.
Lawmakers from both parties told us crypto firms will not escape scrutiny since there are consumer protections in the bill. And while it's not clear whether Republican leaders will reintroduce FIT 21 in the new Congress, there is bipartisan agreement that something must be done to plug regulatory gaps and prevent confusion in a market that already exists.
Where is the United States better served? Are we served by creating clear rules of the road and having this industry thrive here at home? Or should we push it offshore where people are less protected?
But even some of the big financial names on Wall Street have been skeptical of crypto. Jamie Dimon called it pet rock.
There are big skeptics, I think, anytime a new technology, a new industry emerges. The counter to what you're describing is the most successful ETF ever in the United States.
Exchange-traded fund.
Was the Bitcoin ETF. The Bitcoin ETF went live, I think, in January of this year and attracted more assets in a faster amount of time than any ETF ever before.
Exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, are like mutual funds. Offered by well-known investment firms and big banks, they make it easy for people to invest in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies without directly buying it themselves. Even Jamie Dimon's bank offers clients investments in these assets he once described as pet rocks.
Am I surprised that these big banks have gotten into the crypto space? No, because there's huge amounts of money to be made in fees.
Do you think that everyday people who want to make money in the crypto space understand the risk that they assume?
I think many people understand it's a volatile market, and I think many people choose to participate. Many people choose to participate in the gambling market, also very risky. Should we, as a government, tell people how they should and shouldn't use their hard-earned money?
With the value of Ripple's XRP currency up more than 300% since the election, Brad Garlinghouse recently announced the company was putting another $25 million into the industry super PAC Fairshake. With that donation, Fairshake already has $103 million to spend on pro-crypto candidates in the midterm elections 2 years from now.
Michael Lewis has made a literary career finding jump-off-the-page characters and using them to help tell complicated stories. And what could be more complicated than explaining cryptocurrency? Lewis gained all-hours access to Sam Bankman-Fried, known for a time as the J.P. Morgan of crypto. His sector, as ungoverned as his hair, Bankman-Fried was worth more than $20 billion before he turned 30. An unlikely celebrity, his life braided finance, politics, sports, and pop culture. Then the empire crumbled, and today Bankman-Fried sits in jail on various federal charges and faces potential sentences of more than 100 years. Lewis, though, didn't panic sell. He simply went where the story took him. His latest book, Going Infinite, comes out Tuesday, which is also the opening day in the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried.
You had so much access to Sam Bankman-Fried writing this book. What ultimately is the purpose here?
I realized I had an ambition for the book. I saw it as a kind of letter to the jury. I mean, there's going to be this trial, and the lawyers are going to tell two stories. And so there's a story war going on in the courtroom, and I think neither one of those stories is as good as the story I have. You should be willing.
Michael Lewis didn't set out to write this book. 2 autumns ago, he was at home in the Bay Area when he got a call from a friend interested in investing with a young billionaire. Could Lewis meet with this wonderkind and size him up? So it was Lewis brought Sam Bankman-Fried here in the Berkeley Hills for a hike in the park.
You got to remember, I knew nothing about him. All I knew was I was supposed to evaluate his character, and that 18 months earlier he had nothing. Now he had $22.5 billion and was the richest person in the world under 30. He didn't care much about like spending it on yachts. He was going to spend it to save humanity from extinction, kind of thing. So the whole walk was like, my jaw was on the floor by here after I heard all that.
As an author whose stock and trade is finding interesting characters, is your story meter starting to beep about now?
I was on red alert, and I said this to him. I said, I don't know what's going to happen to you. Something's going to happen to you. Can I just come and, ride shotgun? Now, riding shotgun ended up being like hanging on for dear life to an automobile that's going 270 miles an hour and taking every hairpin turn.
My instinct was we should very slowly be trickling out these positions.
Sam Bankman-Fried and Lewis would end up meeting more than 100 times over 2 years, speaking for countless hours. As our camera rolled in July, note how Bankman-Fried shuffled cards and jackhammered his legs and avoided eye contact. Lewis considers Bankman-Fried the most challenging and fascinating character he's ever encountered. This from an author who's been writing nonfiction since the 80s.
I want to talk about that conversation.
Yeah.
The story of Sam's life is people not understanding him, misreading him. He's so different. He's so unusual. I mean, I think in a funny way that the reason I have such a compelling story is I have a character that I do come to know and that the reader comes to know that the world still doesn't know.
Some Japanese yen.
A graduate of MIT, Bankman-Fried saw the world in numbers, framing everything in his life as a probability exercise, including philanthropy. He committed to making as much money as possible, so he could give it away as efficiently as possible, guided by a social movement, effective altruism.
What it means in Sam's instance is you can go out and have a career where you do good. You can go be a doctor in Africa, or you can go out and make as much money as possible and pay people to be doctors in Africa. If you're a doctor in Africa, you end up saving a certain number of lives, but you're only one doctor. But if you can pay 40 people to become doctors in Africa, you're going to save 40 times the number of lives.
This is like a strategy game.
Well, you don't understand Sam Bankman-Fried unless you understand that he turns everything into a game. Right. Everything is gamified.
Bankman-Fried worked as a Wall Street trader before moving to Berkeley at age 25 to start his own trading firm, Alameda Research. Instead of buying and selling stocks or bonds, he would traffic in crypto, a digital form of currency not tied to a centralized system.
The basic idea was to be the smartest person in the crypto markets, to be the one who did the kind of trading in crypto that the smartest Wall Street traders did in stocks.
So these quant skills he had as a trader on regular stocks and equities markets, he was going to bring to this new ascending crypto world.
Correct.
What's the difference between crypto finance and traditional finance?
Well, the promise of crypto finance is the promise of an absence of intermediaries. If I want to wire you $10,000, a bank has to do it. A bank records the transaction, a bank takes some little slice of it. If I want to wire you $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, I can just hit a button and you get it. Right. So you remove the institutions.
Coming out of the 2008 financial crisis, crypto took hold as an anti-establishment, punk rock version of a financial system, which Lewis finds ironic.
In the beginning especially, it's a crowd of people who are incredibly mistrustful of institutions. What attracts them to it is they hate the government, they hate banks. But then they somehow, this pool of incredibly mistrustful people, proceed to trust each other in ways that I wouldn't trust you.
They're parking their money in a sector that's unregulated. There are no physical properties.
Provably squirrely and unreliable.
Right.
Over and over.
But it's predicated on trust.
It's like they are Charlie Brown kicking the football.
Right.
That they're sure that this time Lucy's going to hold it.
Still, Bankman-Fried made a fortune at Alameda Research. And then he really got rich. Instead of simply trading, Bankman-Fried seized on the idea of opening his own cryptocurrency exchange.
One of the things he notices is that all the crypto exchanges are screwed up in one way or another. There are dozens of these places where you can trade crypto, but they're not structured for a professional trader. The technology is bad. They'll lose their customers' money. It's the Wild West. Right. He realizes that if you built a better exchange, he wanted to build an exchange he could trade on. So he creates FTX. And once he created it, it went boom. And when it went boom, he realized that, well, that's the gold mine. It actually isn't trading the crypto.
This is owning the casino,
It's owning
right?
the casino. He started as a gambler, and he realized that, building the better casino was actually going to be more valuable.
FTX has seen explosive growth.
Soon, roughly $15 billion a day in trades were executed on his new exchange, FTX.
If you're sitting in the middle of those transactions and you're taking out even a tiny fraction of a percentage point, there's a lot of money to be made.
Indifferent to the outcome of the trade.
You're taking no risk. You're taking no risk at all. It didn't matter to him whether crypto went up or crypto went down. As long as people are trading crypto, it made money. It's the best business. I had one venture capitalist tell me that several of the venture capitalists thought that Sam might be the world's first trillionaire.
Trillionaire?
They're looking for the next Google. They're looking for the next Apple. They thought FTX had that kind of possibility, that it had a chance to be the single most important financial institution in the world.
As he began accumulating billions as if they were Pokemon cards, Bankman-Fried began attracting something else he wasn't accustomed to.
There's a lot of leverage in cryptocurrency markets.
Attention.
He changed not at all. He'd never been on TV. He goes on TV in his cargo shorts and his messy hair, and he's playing video games while he's on the air.
Wait. He's playing video games on the air.
You would think your first television appearance, you might be a little uptight, a little nervous. And if you watch the clip, you can see his eyes going back and forth, back and forth. This is because he's trying to win his video game at the same time he's on the air.
Whether it was his smarts, his fierce indifference to appearance, or simply his vast wealth, the beautiful people suddenly found him irresistible.
As his net worth goes up, so does his social capital. You write about a Zoom meeting you walked in on.
He says, I got to go do a Zoom. I said, what is it? And he says, there's this person named Anna Wintour. And he didn't know who she was.
You had no idea who she was?
No. So I sat off to one side where she couldn't see me, and I watched this Zoom.
Now, you're thinking, what does Anna Wintour want to do with a schlub like Sam?
Exactly. He is the worst dressed person in America. He is the worst dressed billionaire in the history of billionaires. What she wants him to do is to sponsor the Met Gala, her great ball that she throws every year, which is all about dress and appearances. Sam was a social experiment. He is a person who has nothing, all of a sudden has seemingly infinite dollars, will give it away, is unbelievably open-handed about it, and doesn't ask a whole lot of questions. What that attracts, who shows up when this person exists? Everybody.
Everyone comes to the trough.
Everybody comes to the trough. Everybody wants to be his best friend.
FTX is the safest and easiest way to buy and sell crypto.
Bankman-Fried wanted it known that FTX was the go-to player in crypto.
Hey, it's Shaquille O'Neal, and I'm excited to be partnering with FTX.
He turned to the sports world to bring his exchange both legitimacy and edge. Lewis saw the FTX internal marketing documents.
He paid Tom Brady $55 million for 20 hours a year for 3 years. He paid Steph Curry $35 million for same thing for 3 years.
Pretty good hourly wage.
He spent $100 and something million buying the naming rights for the Miami Heat Arena.
I don't think so.
He spent $25 million making a Super Bowl ad with Larry David.
It's FTX? I don't think so.
For which he then paid Larry David another $10 million. It's breathtaking what's on that list.
Did any of the people surrounding him, these celebrities, do it because they found him interesting, or was it all because he's worth $20-some billion?
It's probably not fair for me to speak for them, but I will speak for them. Tom Brady, I think, adored him. Really? I think Tom Brady thought he was just a really interesting person. I think he'd like to hear what he had to say.
What's up, guys? I'm here with my boy Sam from FTX.
And he really liked Tom Brady. And Sam wasn't like a big sports person, so it was funny to watch that interaction. It was like, these two people actually get along. It's like the class nerd and the quarterback.
The two high school tribes.
The nerd of all nerds. Like, even the nerds don't hang out with this nerd. He's such a nerd. The quarterback somehow likes him, and he somehow likes the quarterback.
Lewis writes in his book that Bankman-Fried's philanthropic ambitions kept pace with his wealth. Never mind doctors in Africa, he set out to confront what he saw as existential threats to all of humanity.
So Sam Bankman-Fried ends up with a portfolio heavily concentrated in two things. Pandemic prevention, because there really are things the government should be doing. And the other thing that made his list that was so interesting was Donald Trump. He took the view that all the big existential problems are going to require the United States government to be involved to solve them. And if the democracy is undermined, we don't have our democracy anymore, all these problems are less likely to be solved. And he saw Trump trying to undermine the democracy, and he thought Trump belongs on the list of existential risks.
To that end, Lewis writes that in 2022, Bankman-Fried met with the most unlikely of allies, Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
You're flying with Sam and he tells you about a meeting he's going to have with Mitch McConnell.
Well, the interesting thing starts before we even get on the plane. I meet him at the airport, and he comes tumbling out of a car, and he's in his cargo shorts and his T-shirt, and he's got balled up in his hand. It takes me a while to see what it is, but it's a blue suit. It's got more wrinkles than any blue suit ever had. It's like it's just jammed in this little ball. And a shoe like falls out of the pile that he's got in his arms. And I say, like, what? Why do you have the suit? He says, Mitch McConnell really cares what you wear when you meet with him. And he's having dinner in 6 hours with Mitch McConnell. And I said, well, you got the suit. You got a belt? He goes, no, I don't have a belt. I said, you have a shirt? He goes, no shirt. And the suit, you really can't really wear that suit. And he goes, yeah, but they told me to bring a suit.
According to Lewis, Bankman-Fried wanted to help McConnell fund Republican candidates at odds with Donald Trump.
What is the subtext of this dinner is Sam is going to write tens of millions of dollars of checks to a super PAC that Mitch McConnell is then going to use to get elected people who are not hostile to democracy.
Wait, so Mitch McConnell has a list of Republican candidates who are sort of on the playing field for democracy versus what he deemed outside.
He and his people had done the work to distinguish between actual deep Trumpers and people who were just seeming to approve of Donald Trump, but were actually willing to govern.
Bankman-Fried ended up giving multi-millions in support of Republican candidates. Back in 2020, Bankman-Fried had ranked among Joe Biden's biggest donors. As 2024 approached, he planned on spending more, albeit in the most unconventional way.
One of the most shocking passages in this book, I thought, came with this revelation that Sam had looked into paying Donald Trump not to run.
That only shocks you if you don't know Sam. Sam's thinking we could pay Donald Trump not to run for president. Like, how much would it take?
Did he get an answer?
So he did get an answer. He was floated. There was a number that was kicking around, and the number that was kicking around when I was talking to Sam about this was $5 billion. Sam was not sure that number came directly from Trump.
Wait. So Sam's looking into paying Trump not to run, and he actually might not have come from Trump himself, but he actually got a price?
He got one answer, yes. The question Sam had was not just is $5 billion enough to pay Trump not to run, but was it legal?
Well, why didn't this happen? Why didn't you follow through?
Well, they were still having these conversations when FTX blew up. So why it didn't happen? He didn't have $5 billion anymore.
Approached for comment by 60 Minutes, neither former President Trump nor Senator McConnell responded. Last November, in a matter of days, mega billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried lost virtually everything, and he soon faced an onslaught of federal fraud charges. When we return, the fall of Sam Bankman-Fried. Meteoric as the rise of Sam Bankman-Fried was, the fall came faster still. In a span of days, a celebrity multi-billionaire became a pariah. His wealth largely evaporated as federal prosecutors mounted a case against him. In his new book, out this week, Michael Lewis details the crash and leaves it to readers to decide if Sam Bankman-Fried was a cryptocurrency conman in cargo shorts or a really smart guy singularly ill-equipped to run and manage a business.
By spring of 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried had planted his flag in the Bahamas. He decided to move his high-flying cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, to the islands. Not for the beaches, but for the friendly regulatory climate. With the Prime Minister on hand, they put shovels in the ground for a new headquarters. Bankman-Fried openly discussed paying off the country's $9 billion national debt. By this point, Michael Lewis and Bankman-Fried had a dynamic that went beyond author-subject.
And he started using me as a sounding board.
For what?
For just like decisions he was making. Should I join Elon Musk in buying Twitter? You know, should we do this? Should we do that?
What'd you tell him?
Mostly my answers were no, no, and no. And he would look at me and say, you're a boring grown-up.
And Bankman-Fried, now 31, told Lewis, now 62, that anyone older than 45 was useless. But Lewis noted that if ever there were a corporate leader in need of adult input to manage 400 employees, it was Sam Bankman-Fried.
What kind of a manager was he?
Horrible. I mean, even his best friends inside the company said Sam is just not built to manage people.
Had Sam managed anything before?
His sole experience of leadership was running puzzle hunts for math nerds in high school, and actually thought deep down, if you asked him, people shouldn't need to be managed. So he proceeded to act on that and basically didn't manage them.
Is there any checks and balances
happening in this environment then?
Well, what checks and balances would you imagine there might be in a corporation?
Chief financial officer?
No, there's no chief financial officer.
HR department?
No, there was no HR department.
Compliance office?
No. There was no board of directors. Or rather, I asked Sam, I said, who's your board of directors? And he said, we don't really have one. I said, what do you mean you don't have one? Everyone has one. He says, there are 2 other people on something called a board of directors, but it's changed and I don't even know their names. And their job is just to DocuSign.
He didn't know the name of the board of directors?
No, he didn't know who was on it.
So he's running this like a lemonade stand, and he's doing enough volume of business. This could be a public traded company if he wanted to.
Oh, no, if it was a publicly traded company, it would be a publicly traded company worth $40 billion. No, it was all Sam's world. And there was nobody there to say, like, don't do that.
FTX purchased a $30 million executive penthouse in a Bahamas resort, flush with an exclusive marina. It was lost on Sam, who worked feverishly in the office and slept on a beanbag chair. But there was another reason he avoided the Lux penthouse. His girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, a former Wall Street trader herself, had kicked him out. Compounding matters, he had put her in charge of running Alameda Research, Bankman-Fried's privately held trading firm.
So the romance between Sam and Caroline goes sideways. How does that impact what happens to FTX and Alameda Research?
Coincidentally, the romance more than goes sideways. They have a falling out where they're basically not speaking to each other. She's not speaking to him at precisely the time crypto collapses.
Explain why that's a problem.
It's a problem because Alameda Research is one of the traders on FTX.
Translation: though Bankman-Fried owned the FTX exchange, he was also trading crypto on FTX through his other business, Alameda Research.
And he was gambling in his own casino. And it created conflicts of interest.
So he owns the casino, but he's still gambling.
Yes, he didn't stop gambling.
Crypto is destabilized.
The value of crypto had been eroding throughout the summer of 2022. Then came a 1-2 punch, a leak of Alameda's unflattering balance sheet in early November. And days later, Changpeng Zhao, head of a rival exchange, took to Twitter to question FTX's viability. This triggered a classic panic run, digital style, on FTX.
How fast was money flowing out of FTX?
In the run, $1 billion a day was leaving. And
$1 billion a day, this thing's gushing.
Yeah, it unravels because the depositors at FTX want their money back, and it's not all there.
It wasn't all there in large part because the investors' money intended for FTX had wound up in Bankman-Fried's privately held fund, Alameda Research. More than $8 billion.
Do you think he knowingly stole customers' money, Sam?
Put that way, no. So there's another side of this. In the very beginning, if you were a crypto trader who wanted to trade on FTX and wanted to send dollars or yen or euros onto the exchange so you could buy crypto, FTX couldn't get bank accounts. So Alameda Research, which could get bank accounts, created bank accounts for people to send money into so that it would go to FTX. But it was held in Alameda Research bank accounts. And $8 billion something piles up inside of Alameda Research that belongs to FTX customers that never gets moved.
It never gets transferred over.
Never gets transferred.
That sounds like a problem.
It's a huge problem.
What's the toughest question you think Sam's going to have to answer?
How do you not know that $8 billion that's not yours is in your private fund? I mean, really, how do you not know? Explain. $8 billion is in your private fund that belongs to other people, and you're saying you didn't know. Please explain how that's possible.
Did you do that?
Yeah, I did.
What did he say?
He said you have to understand that when it went in there, it was a rounding error, that I felt like we had infinity dollars in there, that I wasn't even thinking about it.
I could see people watching this saying, like, come on, guys, this is Elizabeth Holmes in cargo shorts,
Right.
And this is all a ruse. Don't fall for the shtick. This is a bad actor.
It is a little different, supplying phony medical information to people that might kill them. And in this case, what you're doing is possibly losing some money that belonged to crypto speculators in the Bahamas. On the other hand, this is not to excuse. He shouldn't have done that.
Early in the morning of November 11th, Sam Bankman-Fried reluctantly DocuSigned FTX into bankruptcy. It had taken 5 days for FTX to implode.
You go back to the Bahamas as Pompeii is falling. What did you see when you landed?
I got back the day on the Friday of the collapse. It was the afternoon that Sam had signed the bankruptcy papers. And by then, They'd been a mass exodus. Most of the employees had fled, and fled in such a way that, kind of in a ridiculous way. They'd taken the company cars and ditched them at the airport with the keys inside, where they were going to
get the hell out of
Nobody knew what had happened, but they were just scared that they were going to be detained by the local authorities. We drove into the lot, and Sam Bankman-Fried is walking loops around the parking lot. He'd been brought over there earlier to be interviewed by Bahamas authorities, and nobody had given him a ride home. And he was just sitting there all alone.
How do you divorce Michael Lewis, the empathetic human being, from Michael Lewis, the journalist and author who recognizes what a third act this is? Pretty dramatic, right?
If I were a better person, I would have been deeply distressed by all of this. It took about a nanosecond before I thought, oh my God, this is an incredible story.
A month later, Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas and extradited to New York to face federal charges that he had fraudulently used customer deposits to finance billions of dollars of venture capital investments, real estate purchases, and political donations.
What's your response to someone who hears this and says, it's a fun story and it's crypto in the Bahamas, but this is the oldest architecture of a financial collapse that's been going on for centuries?
This isn't a Ponzi scheme. Like when you think of a Ponzi scheme, I don't know, Bernie Madoff. The problem is there's no real business there. The dollar coming in is being used to pay the dollar going out. And in this case, they actually had a great real business. If no one had ever cast aspersions on the business, if there hadn't been a run on customer deposits, they'd still be sitting there making tons of money.
Inside the Beltway, in the Hollywood Hills, and in sports arenas, suddenly, if predictably, it was Sam Bankman who?
He becomes toxic. Like, nobody wants to talk to him. He has no friends. You watch everybody who rushed in rush out.
How did Tom Brady react to this?
The first reaction was it was sadness. I clearly really liked him, and he really liked the hope that he brought. I mean, a lot of people wanted there to be a Sam. You know, there is still a Sam Bankman-Fried shaped hole in the world that now needs filling. Like, that character would be very useful.
What he represented.
What he wanted to do with the resources. And Brady was, I think, crushed, and I think as time has gone by and he ceased to get a really good explanation about what's happened, I think he's just like, he tricked me, I'm angry, I don't want to have anything to do with it anymore.
Starting in December, Lewis began driving the 45 miles from Berkeley to Stanford, where Bankman-Fried was living with his parents, who have also been ensnared in legal proceedings tied to FTX. Out on bail, but wearing an ankle monitor, he left the door open for Lewis so they could continue their conversations. We anticipated speaking with Bankman-Fried in August, but the judge in his case instituted a gag order and then put him in a Brooklyn jail for violating terms of his release. Bankman-Fried has pled not guilty.
He genuinely thinks he's innocent. I can tell you his state of mind 4 or 5 months ago. It's like, if you offered me plead guilty and do 6 months of house arrest, I'd still say no.
What do you suspect his biggest fear is if he has to go to prison?
Not having the internet. Now, that sounds crazy, but I do think that if he had the internet, he could survive jail forever. Without having a constant stream of information to react to, I think he may go mad. If you gave Sam Bankman-Fried a choice, this is quite serious, of living in a $39 million penthouse in the Bahamas without the internet, or the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn with the internet, there's no question in my mind he'd take the jail.
Michael Lewis has never before written something that dovetails so dramatically with a sensationalized news event. Lewis's book, Going Infinite, comes out Tuesday, the same day Sam Bankman-Fried's trial begins.
He made a mockery of crypto in the eyes of many. He was sort of taking away the credibility of effective altruism. How do you see him?
Everything you say is just true, and it's more interesting than that. Every cause he sought to serve, he damaged. Every cause he sought to fight, he helped. He was a person who set out in life to maximize the consequences of his actions, never mind the intent. And he had exactly the opposite effects of the ones he set out to have. So it looks to me like his life is a cruel joke.
If you feel like you've been hearing a lot about Bitcoin lately, those aren't voices in your head. Last month, in an attempt to skirt harsh financial sanctions, a top Russian lawmaker said Russia may start accepting Bitcoin for oil and gas. If you watched the Super Bowl this year, you probably saw the ads for crypto companies. And now, President Biden has turned his attention to digital assets, signing an executive order to examine the risks and benefits of cryptocurrencies. So we thought it was time to try and get our heads around the complicated world of cryptocurrencies, specifically the largest one, Bitcoin. To do that, we went to one of the simplest places in the world, a remote town known as Bitcoin Beach.
On the coast of El Salvador, about an hour from the capital, is a town called El Zonte. Black volcanic sand gives way to warm water and an exceptional point break that draws surfers from around the world. But wander down El Zonte's winding dirt roads, and it's easy to spot a different kind of tourist.
Do you surf?
I don't yet, but I might take it up here.
We met Andreas Kohl, visiting from Liechtenstein. He came to El Zonte because it's one of the first places in the world you can use Bitcoin to pay for just about anything. Tamales, hotels, or souvenirs.
Bitcoin City is happening here, and it might be the next Singapore. I want to see it happen.
Singapore? It's hard to imagine. The only traffic jams in El Zonte are caused by loose livestock. To understand how this remote town of 3,000 became part of a grand Bitcoin experiment and how it all works, we were told to head to this break and look for a middle-aged blonde guy locals call the Man. That's him, Mike Peterson, an expat from San Diego with a degree in economics and a nose for decent waves.
I wound up here on a surf trip, I think like 18 years ago. Fell in love with the warm water, the nice waves, but most especially the people here.
Peterson, who once worked as a financial planner, moved to El Zonte a few years later and started helping those people. In 2015, he started Mission Sake, a charity that supports missionaries and funded scholarships and created local jobs. At that time, most young people here left town or the country to find work.
That's kind of the cycle that we've seen of destruction, of people having to leave because there's not enough opportunity. Then their kids are growing up without their parents here, so they're very vulnerable to the gangs. They join the gangs grow, even you have this kind of destructive cycle.
This is how we grew up here. Like, the opportunities were almost nothing. You know?
You had to leave if you wanted to do something.
That was like the paradigm.
Roman Martinez grew up in El Zonte and started working with Peterson's charity to help kids like Ismael Galdamez. He quit school at 13.
All I wanted to do is to work hard and to live. That's it. Not about my future.
It was just surviving the day, getting
exactly
through the day.
As my parents did. It's sad, but it's the reality.
But then, in 2019, El Zonte got an unexpected break. Peterson says he was introduced to someone representing an anonymous donor with a fortune in Bitcoin who wanted to see it put to good use, with one stipulation.
The stipulation was you can't just convert it into dollars because they believed that the usage of Bitcoin would be what would benefit the people. And so for me, it was like, wow, this is somebody that wants to actually see a circular economy generated using Bitcoin, and they're willing to actually put the funds behind it.
Peterson and a team of community leaders got to work, creating the Bitcoin Beach Initiative. They used the anonymous donation to create dozens of much-needed jobs in El Zonte, but they'd have to pay everyone in Bitcoin.
Be honest, what did they say when you brought up, let's use Bitcoin?
First, they just kind of looked at you with this blank stare like, well, show me these Bitcoins, and how do you hold them, and what do they look like?
All fair questions without an easy answer. But Mike Peterson offered his neighbors and us his best explanation to what might be the most challenging question of all.
What's Bitcoin?
So Bitcoin is the world's first decentralized money that's not controlled by any government. There's no gatekeepers in it. It's obviously lives on the internet. It can be transferred in electronic form. It actually lets people own it themselves, truly own it.
In other words, it's peer-to-peer digital money. There isn't a bank or third party in the middle. Banks have never really been part of the equation for most Salvadorans,
About 70% of the country is unbanked. That means they have limited access to loans, mortgages, or credit cards. Cash has always been king, which made convincing people in El Zonte to work for Bitcoin, a currency they couldn't hold or see, especially difficult. So Mike Peterson and his partners turned their attention to a group much more comfortable with all things digital, teenagers. Ismail Galdamez was one of the first hires.
So we were hiring them to do things in the community, pick up trash out of the river, and then we'd pay them in Bitcoin. And so they got into this rhythm of going out and working and earning Bitcoin.
And so you're giving them the Bitcoin, but do they have anywhere to spend the Bitcoin?
That's always the challenge when you're trying to bring a new system into place, you know, the chicken and the egg problem.
Enter Mama Rosa. Under a tin roof and over an open flame, she runs a popular pupusa spot in town. Her son Jorge works with Mike Peterson and convinced Mama to be the first in El Zonte to accept Bitcoin.
Did she say, where is the money?
Yeah, she say like, okay, if you pay me, but how can I see or when I touch the money?
Yeah, and she just had to trust you.
Yeah, so she say, if you can come and teach me.
Here's how it works. Customers scan her QR code. Then, using a popular phone app called Bitcoin Beach, instantly transfer Bitcoin from their wallets to hers, which she keeps in her apron. Mama Rosa used her Bitcoin savings to buy a truck and 2 cows. The grandmother of 18 is now bullish on Bitcoin.
How do you feel about being a pioneer of technology? You like it? Hola.
But not everyone in town has bought in.
Accept us Bitcoin? No. No. Can I ask you, do you accept Bitcoin? No.
Because Bitcoin is complicated. It's not backed by a government authority. There's also concern about the computer power or energy needed to support Bitcoin's underlying network. Most people don't buy a whole Bitcoin, but a fraction of one. It's largely unregulated and extremely volatile. There's only a limited supply, so its value swells and dips based on demand. Bitcoin was introduced in 2009. A year later, a single Bitcoin was valued at pennies. Its value inched up and down, peaking last November at almost $70,000 a Bitcoin, only to lose around 30% of its value in the last few months.
What happens when it drops 20%? And that's a big deal to a person or a shop owner here. Are they knocking on your door?
Not
going,
knocking
hey,
on the
what's up?
door, but they'll call Jorge and like, hey, what's going on? And so then we'll kind of connect them with people who've been in this from the beginning. They've seen like, yes, there's ups and downs, volatilities along the way, but over the long-term perspective, it's going up in value against the dollar.
But you're not doubling down on this because you personally can get rich.
I will benefit if the price of Bitcoin goes up, but I can't impact that, and I can't influence that. That's not the driving reason behind this. The reason is we want to see El Zonte transformed.
This is all you? Yeah.
About 45 businesses are now riding the Bitcoin wave in El Zonte. You can pay your dentist, the electric bill, or for a cup of coffee with Bitcoin.
So I put in $2 and send?
Send, yes.
Mike Peterson and his partners use Bitcoin to help pay for this continuing education center. There are computer and English classes.
I call back later. I call back later.
Teachers are paid in Bitcoin. All of it's attracted good press, Bitcoin tourists, and a few hoodie-wearing tech entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so we had gone to El Salvador just to prove that our product worked and prove that we could be better at Western Union and Western Union.
Jack Mallers is a 28-year-old CEO from Chicago who developed an app called Strike, designed to disrupt one of the biggest businesses in El Salvador, remittances, money sent from overseas. Last year, Salvadorans received more than $7 billion through services like Western Union, which can charge upwards of 10% for a transfer that can take days. Using Bitcoin's digital infrastructure, known as Rails, the Strike app allows users to send US dollars across borders instantly for pennies.
We launch it. It gets 1 download a day. Then it gets 100 downloads a day. Then it gets 1,000 downloads a day. Then it gets 20,000 downloads a day.
Then Mallers got an unexpected message on his phone.
You get a direct message on Twitter from who?
The brother of the president.
and he wants to meet with you.
He wants to meet with me, and he gave me 24 hours.
El Salvador's populist president, Nayib Bukele, once referred to himself as the world's coolest dictator. He's been accused of illegally grabbing power and ordering soldiers to occupy the nation's legislative assembly to push through his agenda.
It was scary. It was really scary. I thought there were likely two outcomes, is that they were not happy with me interfering with the financial system in El Salvador, or they were tremendously happy and bought into the vision that this was representative of a better world for not only El Salvador, but the planet.
His utopian blueprint for Bitcoin led to months of conversations with the government that led to this. Last summer, at a Bitcoin conference in Miami, Bukele announced in a video message that El Salvador would become the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as an official currency, alongside the US dollar.
It wasn't discussed among lawmakers or
Never.
no debate?
We never heard anything before that day.
Luis Membreño is an economist based in San Salvador and an outspoken critic of President Bukele's policies.
The government wants people to think that this can be a currency, but this is just an asset, and a speculative asset with a huge volatility. Imagine the US dollar having a volatility of 20% in one day. It would be crazy.
El Salvador is billions of dollars in debt and has long relied on loans from the International Monetary Fund to prop up its economy. In January, the IMF expressed concern about the risk of Bitcoin's volatility and has delayed further relief to El Salvador. But Bukele is doubling down. He spent an estimated $400 million of taxpayer money to push Bitcoin into circulation. Protests followed.
He's calling himself the CEO of El Salvador. What kind of CEO do you think he is?
An irresponsible one, an immature one.
But isn't Bukele kind of a genius in a way, because he's changed the narrative? You know, we're not talking about the gang problem. We're talking about, look what they've done with Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely. And he's so good at it. The problem is there's going to be a day in which people will find out that the government is indebted, that they will increase taxes to everybody, and the party's over.
In El Zonte, 19-year-old Ismael Galdamez doesn't worry about a wipeout. He's teaching surf lessons and back in school. And when he learned the shaved ice vendors in El Zonte were going 30 minutes out of town to buy ice, he decided to become the ice supplier in town and used his Bitcoin profits to buy this freezer.
It was $200.
And you cut those guys out of the ice skate.
Exactly.
You're a shark.
Yes.
A Bitcoin shark in braces. Ismael is planning to move his parents and siblings into this new house in El Zonte later this month. He plans to pay the mortgage in Bitcoin.
"10 years ago, a mysterious computer programmer invented a new type of money that wasn't backed by any government or kept in any bank. There were no coins or bills, just long strings of letters and numbers stored inside a network of computers that anybody could be a part of by downloading some free software over the internet. Today, that computerized currency, Bitcoin, is well known, though little understood. And Bitcoin's popularity has inspired the creation of thousands of other types of digital money known as cryptocurrency. Over the last decade, you could have made a 5 million % profit by investing in cryptocurrency, or you could have lost everything. It has been a wild ride, and few people have experienced the highs and lows more than a 29-year-old named Charlie Shrem.
It felt like I was riding a rocket ship that had no mission control. You were going up very quickly, but we were not thinking about what would happen when eventually we have to go back down. And for me, I dealt with the ultimate going back down.
You crashed hard.
Crashed really hard.
Charlie Shrem was once described as the last kid who'd be picked for a game of dodgeball, but he always felt comfortable around computers. He grew up in a Syrian Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York, and was a senior at Brooklyn College when in 2011 he started a business in his parents' basement. He called it BitInstant because it enabled people to buy Bitcoin quickly using dollars at a time when interest in the computerized currency was just starting. When did you first notice the business taking off?
Almost instantly. The business...
Really? That fast?
I had $1,000 that I threw into it. That was my own money. And then within days, it was getting crazy. And I had my bar mitzvah money that I wanted to use.
Within a year, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss of Facebook fame became major investors in Charlie's company. By 2013, he was pronounced one of Bitcoin's first millionaires. Estimates of his net worth range from a few $1 million to $45 million.
I went from being a kid who had no self-confidence to the complete opposite, with a crazy ego. And I was doing media interviews every day, and I was the evangelizer of the industry, the Bitcoin Moses, as they would call me.
You go from being the last kid picked at dodgeball to,
running the team.
How did Charlie and other 20-somethings become kings of a new industry that deals in money you can't deposit in the bank? To understand that, you have to go back to a time when confidence in banks had plummeted.
The Dow tumbled more than 500 points.
Shortly after the collapse of Lehman Brothers during the financial crisis of 2008, this paper started circulating on the internet. It proposed creating an electronic cash system that would allow people to pay one another online without going through a financial institution. To this day, no one has the faintest idea who the paper's author, Satoshi Nakamoto, is. But he or she or they created ingenious software that anyone in the world could download onto their computer for free. The computers running the Bitcoin software were then able to work together over the internet and perform functions normally handled by banks, like keeping accurate records and guarding against fraud. The computers maintain a constantly updated record of transactions involving Bitcoin. The record is called the blockchain, and it's how the network keeps track of who owns what. One of the most innovative features of the system is that every computer on the network can keep a copy of this record showing every transaction ever recorded.
The blockchain's stored on thousands of computers around the world.
Naya Narula is the director of the Digital Currency Initiative at the MIT Media Lab.
The idea behind the blockchain is that it's everywhere, and everyone can look at it and verify it for themselves. And so what this means is that you get this sense of trust, you get this sense of security, because everyone's watching.
If you're wondering what there is to watch, here it is. Bitcoin's not much to look at, just letters and numbers. Why would people have trust in something that is just numbers and letters? It doesn't have anything backing it up.
I think to answer that question, you really have to go back to sort of the roots of money and what is money. The reason that the $5 bill in my wallet has value is because I know you'll take it from me for something. I can buy a sandwich from you with that $5 bill.
So it has value because people believe in it.
Exactly. And that's it. That's really it.
At first, Bitcoin was just an interesting experiment conducted at home by computer programmers like Laszlo Hunyats. Because his computer was one of the computers helping to maintain the Bitcoin network, Satoshi Nakamoto's software rewarded Hunyats with some Bitcoin. But there wasn't much he could do with it back in 2010. So he went on an internet chat forum and asked whether anyone would be willing to buy him some pizza in exchange for 10,000 Bitcoin.
And somebody said, hey, I'll take you up on that offer. Here you can see the original pizzas, and that's my daughter's hand. She was a year old.
That pizza, obtained with Bitcoin by Laszlo Hunyats and enjoyed by his daughter 9 years ago, is believed to be the first real-world transaction involving cryptocurrency. Do you feel like after that changed people's perception of it in a way?
I think it made it real for some people. I mean, it certainly did for me.
In the years that followed, Bitcoin caught on. Some merchants started accepting it, and it became possible to buy and sell Bitcoin for dollars through businesses called exchanges. As the market price of one Bitcoin rose from $0 to $1 to $100 and more, an esoteric experiment grew into a global industry. On a windswept plain in Iceland, these warehouses are closely guarded at all times. We were asked not to disclose their exact location. This is one of the places where the records, the blockchains of cryptocurrencies, are now kept. State-of-the-art computers work 24/7, performing calculations that safeguard the records. In industry lingo, this is called a mine.
This does not look like any mine I've ever been in.
Yes. Now this is a mine of the new world. This is the new gold mine.
Marco Strang is the CEO of a company called Genesis Mining.
So there's tens of thousands of processing units in here. If you add all the computing power of all the processing units together, you have more than the world's #1 supercomputer.
Back in New York, by 2013, Charlie Shrem had finally moved his company's computers out of his parents' basement. He was spending a lot of time traveling to industry conferences and talking up Bitcoin. Charlie was charismatic. Charlie was funny. But could Charlie be trusted to run a business? In a new book, Bitcoin Billionaires, Ben Mesrick describes how BitInstant's biggest investors, the Winklevoss twins, grew concerned that their young CEO was spending too much time traveling and partying and not paying enough attention to the details of running his company. For example, Charlie knew the U.S. government was concerned about how cyber thieves and money launderers were using Bitcoin. His company was required to monitor its customers and report any suspicious activity. Banks have whole departments that are supposed to do this. The person at BitInstant who Charlie put in charge of it was Charlie.
So you were in charge of making sure that you complied with rules and regulations regarding
Yes.
financial transactions. Was that a good idea?
No. Very bad idea.
In 2013, Charlie had other problems too. A documentary called The Rise and Rise of Bitcoin showed what happened when the price of Bitcoin rapidly rose and fell. Charlie's company and an exchange it did business with couldn't keep up with customers' orders.
People can't buy and sell, and they can't withdraw, and they can't deposit, because the whole thing is just a fritz.
BitInstant went out of business in July 2013, a victim of Bitcoin's volatile landscape and Charlie's many mistakes.
I look back at myself and I say, I don't even know if I would do business with myself.
Essentially, you're saying you couldn't be trusted then?
100%.
6 months later, in January 2014, he was returning from a trip abroad when he got stopped at passport control in Kennedy Airport.
I got surrounded by a whole poo-poo platter of federal agents.
A poo-poo platter of federal
like all
agents?
mixture. You have DEA, IRS, NYPD, JFK Security, all of them.
Federal agents had evidence that Charlie knew one of his customers was buying Bitcoin and then reselling it on a website where it was used to buy illegal drugs.
When I got arrested, the first thing I told my lawyer is, I'm guilty. Let's make a deal. Because I knew immediately that I had done what they said I did.
One of Bitcoin's first millionaires was now one of its first felons. But that didn't stop the market price of Bitcoin from rising from about $250 when Charlie went to prison in 2015 to nearly $20,000 at the end of 2017. It then plunged 84% before climbing back to more than $8,000 this past week. Remember, a Bitcoin was worth less than a penny when Laszlo Hunyats first traded Bitcoin for pizza 9 years ago. We calculated that if Hunyats had held on to all the Bitcoin he used back then to get various items, much of it pizza, by the time of our interview, those Bitcoins would have been worth
$800 million.
Yeah.
So, okay, sorry, let me just get this straight. You spent about $800 million on pizzas.
Well, if you look at today's exchange rate.
Are there nights you wake up like in a cold sweat where you think, I could have had $800 million if I hadn't bought those pizzas?
I think thinking like that is not really good for me.
There's a long list of financial leaders who think Bitcoin's not good for anyone. Lael Brainerd, one of the governors of the Federal Reserve, agreed to speak with us because she wanted to make sure ordinary investors understand the risks of cryptocurrency.
There are people who say that cryptocurrency is better than real currency because it's not controlled by any government and it means it's not subject to manipulation by central bankers like you. No offense.
The U.S. currency has a whole set of legal protections around it. The Federal Reserve and ultimately the U.S. Treasury stand behind it. And when you hold your dollars in a bank account, you have deposit insurance.
And that doesn't exist with cryptocurrencies.
None of those accountability mechanisms exist for Bitcoin.
Charlie Shrem spent a year in prison. When he got out, the man once described as Bitcoin Moses worked in a restaurant parting seas of dirty dishes for $8 an hour. But like Bitcoin, Charlie Shrem bounced back. 3 years after getting out of prison, he's living very comfortably in Florida. He told us he's made money blogging, consulting, and investing in cryptocurrency, and is now captain of his own destiny. He's even got a boat named Satoshi after Bitcoin's mysterious creator. After watching this, you may be wondering why the world needs cryptocurrencies. Naya Narula of MIT's Digital Currency Initiative argues they can make a difference.
The thing that excites me about cryptocurrencies is that we can experiment with the transfer of value. We can put new features into money. We can change the way money works.
She says cryptocurrency has already helped people in countries like Venezuela, where the monetary system is in crisis. And in the future, it may be able to do things like speed up and lower the cost of worldwide money transfers.
People used to say, why do we need email? I can just call someone on the phone. And now we can't live without it.
So this is one of those conversations that 20 years from now, someone could replay and have a good laugh because I'm asking such moronic questions that will be so obvious to everybody.
Or they'll be laughing at me because I said cryptocurrencies were going to be a thing and they totally flamed out and died.
It still could go either way.
It could really go either way. That's what makes it so exciting and interesting.